is the Nurses Doing GAMSAT podcast, brought to you by Thankflip GAMSAT. We're here to teach you how to smash the GAMSAT, get into medicine, and become a flippin' great doctor.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Nurses Doing GAMSAT podcast. I am Dr. Tom Forfer, and I am joined by the amazing, the incredible, the dressed in red today, Marie Jordan Forth. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you. So excited to be here. It is an absolute welcome change from the chaos that has been this week because we've been moving. We are kind of in between two places. And I'm just happy that I don't get to think about boxes for the next hour or so, or however long we're here.
It makes me think about all the boot campers that we help who are moving while preparing for the games. I can't imagine trying to juggle and working full time, trying to juggle all of that. It's been a headache just to move. In a relatively quiet time of games prep, right? This is kind of a quiet time. I've literally got a green screen behind me, and then there's boxes behind that green screen. So I've got this artificial kind of background thing.
I'm not even in the office. I'm in a totally different place because it's just chaos. So,
all right. Well, sorry to cut you off there. What were we saying? So today, what we're talking about, I cut you off again.
I guess we're not in the same office anymore, so you can. It makes it more difficult. But anyway, what are we talking about today, Tom?
We're talking about what to do once GAMSAT results are released. Because when you listen to this, chances are the results have finally, after some delay this year, been released. And the question becomes, what does it mean? What do you do? What if you're happy with your score? You got a great one. What do you do to make sure you get an interview? What if you're unhappy, you got a low score, you didn't get enough of what you wanted? What do you do then? Or what if you're not sure, you're kind of borderline, maybe it's enough, maybe not, what do I do? And we're going to cover all of that today. So it's a really important podcast for you guys to listen to. And also we're going to be giving you some incredible resources in the show notes, one of which compares all the requirements for each medical school side by side, so you can compare them in one place. But yeah, the show notes will be, you can go to the link in the description of this podcast, wherever you're watching or listening to it. But Marie, how about we jump in talking about what is the actual GAMSAT score? What does it mean?
No, I don't want to jump into that yet. I want to say congratulations to our amazing bootcamp members even before we jump into that, because this time of year I love getting the phone calls, the texts, the DMs, all the messages, the calls, just saying oh my God, I did it. I absolutely, sorry, I'm babysitting a dog here and she's got her squeaky toy.
Squeaky toy. I can hear it. That's what I dog biting a squeaky toy. That's it.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just going to roll with it. That's life, isn't it?
And I've got the cat back here. So if you see a furry tail going through here, it's probably going to be the cat at one point.
So congratulations to our bootcamp members, because I know a ton of them are super happy with their results and now they're thinking about next steps. But I guess we first have to start, because I think there's going to be a bunch of people that are happy. If you're listening to it, you're either going to be happy or unhappy. And if you're
not sure,
or not sure, like that gray zone. So we've either got to kind of find out where you are and then what the next best steps are, because every single person that has a result is going to have a next step now. So Tom, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about how to interpret the scores, the total scores, each section, all of that, weighted, unweighted, all of that kind of stuff, just so that people can understand what it all means.
All right. So when you got your result, you logged into the ACER system and you got 4 marks, right? There was a section 1 score, section 2, section 3, and the overall score. Let's start talking about the individual section scores. Now, that's not your raw score. It doesn't mean that if you got a 61, that doesn't mean you got 61 out of 100 correct, or a 61%, right? It's been scaled and played with on the bell curve. We've all heard of the bell curve before, right? ACER do that. That's probably why they had that delay this year, because they were getting fancy with all the all the different things, all the
Can
different
I just
calculations.
not everybody's heard of the bell curve, so I'm just going to go into it very quickly.
Okay.
Where basically there is a graph, and you got to think about the graph if it looks
Shaped
like a
like a
bell.
bell. Yeah.
And so the top of the bell is the 50th percentile, which has the greatest number of students, and it's around that 50 mark. And so if your raw score in the essays, for example, was 90 out of 100, but the average score was 90 out of 100, you're going to get to the 50th percentile.
Yeah.
And then as you get to the low scores of like the 30s and the high scores of like the 80s and 90s, you kind of going to have less and less and less people in those
Yeah, so if you imagine the
areas.
curve, and under the curve, that's where where the people are, and so the curve is highest in the middle because that's the where the most amount of people are, and then down the sides of the bell, there's less area under the curve, so there's fewer and fewer people the further out you go. So that means there's going to be a few people with really low scores in the 30s and lower, and there's going to be only a few people with scores up in the high, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
So yeah, I didn't want to brush over that because some people, when I
Okay.
speak to them on the phone, haven't heard of the bell curve. So
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean that's something that many universities do that as well. But generally, yeah, GAMSAT is the belt. They live and die by it. Like it is, your score is not a reflection of your act or what you actually got
no.
on the GAMSAT. Right? You could have got far less. You could have got far more. We'll never ever know because that's kind of the magic. The 11 secret herbs and spices of how ASA do their stuff and pop out with the GAMSAT score, right?
And this is what people need to realize, that this is a competition. You are in the intellectual Olympics right now because it's not you versus you. It's you versus everyone else. So it actually matters how the cohort went rather than your individual raw score because it's such a comparison. You can't have 2 gold medals at the Olympic Games.
Yeah,
There's
that's a good way
only
to put
one.
it. Yeah. All right, cool. And so then section 1, 2, and 3, that's how they're scored, right? On that bell curve, you're given this mark that's no indication of the percentage you got correct, just like, what maybe you got in the 40s or the 50s or the 60s. It depends on where you are on that bell curve. That's kind of how that mark is given, right? So, and then that you got this fourth result, which is your overall score. And the way that ASA calculate that is they get your section 3 score and they multiply it by 2. So section 3 is worth twice as much. They multiply it by 2, and they add in the section 1 and 2 scores, and then they divide all of that by 4. And that's your overall GAMSAT score. And that's referred to as a weighted GAMSAT score in the sense that they're weighting section 3 as more important. Right? So it's got a weighted GAMSAT score. Now, the unweighted GAMSAT score, you won't have that on your results. That's something that you can calculate, and that's something that some of the medical schools use, which we'll talk about in a second. And an unweighted one is where they just take the score for sections 1, add it to 2, add it to 3 without multiplying section 3 by 2. They just add them all up and divide them by 3, and that's your average unweighted GAMSAT score. Now, that's important to note because some of the medical schools, like I said, use the weighted, some of them use unweighted. So you need to calculate that unweighted so that you know where you stand. So for some people, if you got a great score in sections 1 and 2, but lower in section 3, your unweighted will be higher than your weighted, which will then help you to decide on which medical schools to prioritize in the GEMSAS system. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of how this starts to get complicated. We're already talking about bell curves and mathematical equations and how to calculate your results and 2 different types of GAMSAT scores. And this is just the beginning. But essentially, that's what your score means, right? So then the question becomes, is your score high enough? Is it good? Is it bad? Where do you stand? And this gets a little bit more complicated. And we're going to have a podcast episode coming out next week about this, and another one for the non-GEMSAS after that. But what I'm going to give you a resource right now. It's going to be in the show notes. It's called our Med Schools Summary page. Essentially, it's a page on our website where you've got a table and it compares all the medical schools side by side for what's a competitive score, what's the minimum, and what are their application requirements. Because what you've got to understand is that there's a minimum score to apply, and then there's a competitive GAMSAT score. All right, so here's what the difference is. The minimum score is just the minimum that you need to be able to that they'll accept your application, right? So that is generally at least 50 in each section and 50 overall. If you have less than that, they won't even let you apply. But just because you have 51 or 52 doesn't mean you're going to get in anywhere. You need to have a competitive score. And generally, depending on which, now here's the thing, there are so many different factors that play into this. Your ability to get an interview is definitely, your GAMSAT score and your GPA are the two most important factors, but there is also, is it weighted or is it unweighted GAMSAT score? Is it a weighted GPA or unweighted GPA? Are there bonus? This is where it gets really interesting. Are there bonuses that you get because of your different experiences or background that give you an advantage at that medical school? And so this is why we've created a whole page dedicated to the applications, and in fact, a whole bootcamp program about that. But just to kind of give you some resources to start looking at now, start with our med school info page. There'll be a link in the show notes for this. But I'm going to leave it just at that, because otherwise we can spend like I said, we've got a whole program going into great depth on this and what to do. But just to give you an understanding of what to do next. So you've got your GAMSAT score. You're going to look at how it compares to the other, how it sits with the medical schools, but looking at our site. And then you need to know the important dates. Before we talk about, what if your score is high, low, whatever, what to do, let's talk about the important dates, because now is a very critical time. You can't sit around on your results. You need to act fast, because the applications for the medical schools, for most of them, close on the 30th of May, unless GEMSAS makes some adjustments because ACER released their results very late.
They've done that in the past, though, haven't they?
Yeah,
They have
this isn't
made
the first time.
adjustments.
Yeah, this is the first
and
time.
I've found that when ACER have released the results a little bit later, it's usually because there's something going on. There's a reason for it. So we may find out, and I don't know, I've just got my crystal ball out here. We may find out that there was some sort of difficulty or challenge at one of the testing sites or something, because they're generally pretty on time. Like, they say mid-May, they mean mid-May. But what I would love, if I had a magic ball, I would love to tell ACER, just give us like a date and work to that date. And if it's going to be late, then push the date back. But this like limbo of like keeping us like, is it today? Is it tomorrow? Is it the next day? It kills people.
Yeah.
Like, I've had some students just like proper anxiety attack about, oh my God, is it today? And it's like, they don't have anything to worry about. They've got good results, but just the anxiety of not knowing. So like, if by some magic there's an ACER representative listening to this today, please just choose a goddamn date and allow us to like have some peace of mind. And then if you need to move the date, I don't think anyone's gonna have a problem. I just think it alleviates some of the stress for us, for students.
Yeah, and the fact that it's all digital now as opposed to on paper, in my mind, it'll speed things up, because you don't have to feed those old paper kind of, where you used to put A, B, C, whatever for the answers. You don't have to feed them into a computer, and that could be a potential point of that breaks down. Now it's all digital, and the essays are done 2 weeks before or 3 weeks before the two sections 1 and 3. So, but who knows what's going on? They've got a lot to deal with, lots to manage, thousands upon thousands of candidates and different testing centers, and
there's a lot that could go wrong. I do not feel sorry for them, though.
No. And there's probably, I guarantee you that for every one of our students contacting us, stressing out, there's probably about 10 or 20 contacting ACER and hassling them about the results. So, totally. As much as we make fun of ACER for being evil geniuses, I think they got a tough job.
Totally. So then tell me more about the dates. So 30th of May is what needs to be on our radar. Put in your diaries. I do not recommend people apply on the 30th of May, because that is the absolute last time. But in the past, they've had errors in their systems where they wouldn't the applications weren't going through, maybe because there was too many people. So I personally would always aim for a couple of days before as a minimum to get it all in, because God forbid something happens on the system on the last day and you don't get the opportunity to apply. Like, that's a year of your life gone. So,
and so the 30th of May is the date for the GEMSAS or GEMSAS, people say it differently, applications. Now, what is that, right? So GEMSAT or GEMSAS is essentially, they refer to it as a consortium, which kind of sounds like a drug cartel to me. Essentially, they've a lot of the medical schools said, you know what, doing this whole application thing is kind of difficult. We're going to delegate it to this other company, and then they most of the medical schools do that, and then GEMSAS they receive your applications, they process them, and they give you an interview with one of the schools out of that system. And you have to rank which schools you want to apply for. You can't apply for all of them. You've got to rank the top 5 in order of preference. And that order of preference determines where you're most likely to get an interview, where you're unlikely to get an interview. And you can get an interview with your first preference, do the interview, but then you get an offer from your third preference. Or even the other way around, you can get an interview from your third preference, but then later get an offer from your first preference. So again, it gets complicated.
You can? I thought you couldn't get an offer from your first. I thought you couldn't get an offer from your first preference. It was only preferences underneath.
Oh, yes, you're right. Okay, yeah, you're right. So what I was thinking, okay, I kind of got ahead of myself. So sometimes people, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later. We talk about being strategic with your preferences. Sometimes, let's say someone gets like a score of 67. It's high, but not quite high enough. And maybe you'll get in, maybe not. And they really want to get into the University of Melbourne. They'd love to get into Melbourne, but that score is not quite there. Maybe not. Oh, it's hard to tell. Unlikely to get it. But they're very likely to get a position with the University of Notre Dame, say. And so what people you would think you could do is put Melbourne first, and if you don't get that, you'll definitely get Notre Dame second. But you don't, right? You get nothing, because what the GEMSAS system tends to do is they try and offer as many first preferences as possible. So they'll start off with giving as many first preferences. So by the time they get to your second, and so if you're, let's say, you've put Melbourne first, but you didn't have the score for Melbourne. So all the people who had the score for Melbourne, they get those positions. But then also all these people put Notre Dame first, and they had the scores for Notre Dame.
Potentially a lower score. Potentially a lower score than you.
Yeah, with a lower score. Let's say they got a 64, right? Or let's say they got a 65, because that's probably more accurate. A 65. And then they got an interview offer because that was their first preference. Notre Dame was their first preference. But by the time they got to this giving second preferences, well, all the Notre Dame spots were taken and you miss out, even though you have a high GAM score. So this is where it gets tricky. And this is why it's important to have a very purposeful approach. And that's kind of what I was thinking when I was saying first, second preferences, etc. But I think from that, you're getting a sense of how important the order of priorities or the preferences is in the GEMSAS application process. And that accounts for the vast majority of medical schools. And again, you can see this on our free med schools info website, where we have all the GEMSAS and non-GEMSAS medical schools application requirements, summaries, and in detail as well. But then you've got their applications, the GEMSAS one, close on the 30th of May. And so some of the medical schools have rather substantial, a burden of proof that you have to show that you qualify for their school and for their bonuses. So that can take some time to organize. So again, that's why it's important for you to understand these dates and to get onto it ASAP. Then you've got the non-GEMSAS universities, and they've gone, you know what, we don't want to be with you guys. We want to do things on our own. We want to process our own applicants and do it our way. And so there's 4 medical schools, Flinders, Monash, USyd, and UTAS, who do that. And essentially, you've got to apply for those medical schools individually on their websites. And those universities have later dates, later cutoff dates for their applications. And so that's So you should focus on GEMSAS first and then non-GEMSAS after that.
You know what I like to think, Tom?
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of the application process. It's very, very underestimated by people.
I
But
think they're starting to get it now. Hopefully they're starting to get it.
if you're in like that gray zone, I want you to think about it more like an art than a science. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. There is no even playing field. The order of preference is just as important as the GPA, is just as important as the GAMSAT, and is just important as like your background, like in terms of what bonus points you may have or what CASPer you have or any of the other things that kind of come into play. It is an art. There is no one way of getting it right. There are multiple ways, and taking a systematic approach to it is of understanding the whole lay of the land is the only way that you're going to look at your personal results to be able to put the best application forward in terms of preference order and whatever else you need. Because if you haven't taken into consideration all of the data and you go, hey, I just want to go to UMelb, so I'm just going to put that first, even though it's unlikely with your data that you're going to get an interview, you're really screwing up your chances of going anywhere else. So we've got to look at this really like from a bird's eye view. And I know we're probably getting into a little bit of a nitty gritty, but I just want to highlight that it's an art. And going to that med school info site, it's for free, it's on our website, and just being able to see everything in one hit is amazing. The thing with the GEMSAS applications is they're only going to give you one interview offer. That is it. You can't get an interview offer for UMelb and Deakin. They are both part of the consortium. You can't. But there is a possibility of getting multiple interviews if you get an interview offer from like GEMSAS unis or the consortium and potentially one of the individual unis, because they don't speak to each other.
Yeah.
So USyd is not speaking to any of the consortium unis to know who's got what where.
No.
And so there is potential of getting more than one interview offer. And to me, that's
exciting. And then more than one offer from a medical school. Like we had a number of boot campers in that situation last year, where we had boot campers with 2, 3 interviews, and then 2 offers from 2 medical schools, and then they're in an amazing position to have to choose between the medical schools.
It's like boohoo, they're crying into their stethoscope, those people.
Yeah.
Like, what a hard decision. It's like what everybody freaking wants.
Yeah.
So
most people just take one, right? They've got 2.
Yeah. So I think, just stepping back, and this goes regardless of whether you've got an amazing GAMSAT score or a not so amazing GAMSAT score, seeing it as an art and understanding how to do it properly to maximize the number of interview offers you get is going to maximize the number of med school offers that you get.
And so then you've submitted your applications, and then next are the interview offers, which for GEMSAS come out at the end of August. You'll get one interview from a GEMSAS medical school. Hopefully it's your first preference, could be second, third, fourth, fifth, who knows, depending on where you stand.
I've definitely seen people get their last preference. Like, don't underestimate.
Could be. And then the actual interviews are held about 2 weeks later. So there isn't much time between receiving an interview offer and having the actual interview. But the interview itself at that point becomes just the medical school is a bit different as to how they weight the interview, but generally it's at least 50% of the ranking at that point. So once the interview is over, they will rank you guys based on at least 50% generally interview, and then the other 50% will be a combination of other factors so far, like your GAMSAT score, GPA, bonuses, CASPer, etc. They're all a bit different. Again, it's all on our website for you to see. And so then
I remember, Tom. Can I tell a little story here?
Yeah.
Because I remember a couple of years ago, one of our bootcamp members, she got a 68 and she got into, I won't say which uni, she had an okay GPA. It was like maybe a 6.5 or a 6.6. It was an okay GPA. It wasn't bad. But a 68, I would kind of see that as like a gray zone, kind of like it's not a 72 kind of, but 68, it's a good enough score definitely to apply. She gets into Notre Dame, and then I get a non-boot camp student on the phone with me, and we were talking through what happened, and he had the same GPA, whatever it was, 6.5, 6.6, but he had some like 71 or 72 GAMSAT and didn't get in, like say interviewed to the same place and didn't get in. And he's like, I don't know what happened. And I was like, I know exactly what bloody happened here. You fluffed up your interview. Because the interview at that stage for that particular uni was worth 50% of your overall offer, and the 25%, or whatever it was, a little bit less of, you know, the GAMSAT and the GPA and whatever other bonus points. And so I think that people really sometimes underestimate how important the interviews are, because they're not just something to kind of like, oh yeah, I've done job interviews before. These are, and I'm sure we'll do full podcast episodes about it, so I don't want to get too much into it, but these multiple mini interviews are situational. They're not black and white, and they make up such a significant part of the offer that you got to take them seriously. Like, I remember Will, who sat with us, his first sitting, he was a boot camp member, got a 72. And then, but he sat with maybe not, let's just say not a lot of time in terms of weeks, but he spent like 40 hours a week studying. So like he studied a lot, but he kind of crammed it all in. Not what I recommend. Then as part of the boot camp, we have this like guarantee. If you don't get the result you want, you can sit with us again. He got a 72 and he was like, I'm not happy with the result. And I was like, Will, you went pretty well. Like, you're good. You probably don't have to sit again. He's like, no, I can do better. So the opposite happened. He started studying for September, but he was doing less hours per week. So he was kind of like stretching it all out. But he then got like an interview offer. And it was like 2-3 weeks before the exam. And we were like, stop studying for the GAMSAT. Only do interview prep. So the next sitting, like he literally stopped all of his like GAMSAT study. And it was just like for those 2-3 week period before the interview, he was just doing that. And it was like around the same time as the GAMSAT, right? Very convenient.
And it will be this year too, guys. It will be this year as well.
So he sits the GAMSAT with like lots of prep, but kind of no prep right at the end, sits the interview as well, gets an interview, like gets the offer to med school in November, like first preference, gets in with his 72. Then a couple of days later, he gets a 78 in the GAMSAT. But if that's you, like, stop studying for the GAMSAT at that point, because the September GAMSAT has nothing to do with your application that you just put in May, and you've got to give the interviews as much as you can.
Yeah, and I think another kind of story about how important the interviews are is probably my experience with the UCIT interview when I did it back in the day. Right, I had my GAMSAT score at the time was great, put me in a strong position to get into UCIT. People have been getting in with that score. My GPA was great. I had all these work experience things to talk about. But then I went to the interview and I bombed it. Like I was not ready. I didn't know how to answer the questions appropriately. I didn't do enough practice, enough drills. I didn't have a structure or a way to do it. And I didn't get that offer, right? That was my second attempt at getting into medicine, 2 years in, and I didn't get into UCIT. And then that was a big realization for me that I couldn't fluff around with the interviews. And the next year, it was a completely different story. I had another interview, but with Notre Dame in Sydney, and I got in at that point. And then I went on to actually become an interviewer, doing the MMIs, and so understanding exactly what's going on, going through that, messing it up to learning, seeing the difference between messing it up and actually performing well, and then becoming a doctor and a medical student, seeing what we're actually looking for in a medical student, and then being on the panel doing the marking, right? That has allowed us to really understand what the schools are looking for and to help guide and coach and mentor our boot campers. So much so that last year, every single boot camp member who got an interview ended up getting into medicine. So that was and some of them even got multiple offers, 2, 3 offers. So that was an incredible
Can I put a
achievement.
disclaimer on that though?
Yeah,
We don't magically have access to any of the interview questions they're going to ask. They
no,
don't send us anything. We don't have that. But instead,
we
the
don't need
way
it.
that we teach is that if you understand from a conceptual and a strategy point of view how to answer any question, then you don't need the questions in advance
No,
because you know how to answer any questions. You have a step-by-step formula of how to articulate, how to bring it forward. So to me, it's like your experience. I know sometimes people like hear, oh my God, Dr. Tom, he was an interviewer, and they think we have some sort of like advanced
we have
access
the
to
answers.
stuff and we have the answers. And it's like, no, actually, we don't. And to be honest, even if we did get them, I don't think that's fair to
Well, it
give them
wouldn't
to
help. It
people.
actually work
No.
against you because they change
Yeah.
them every year. They're always changing them up. There are a couple that stay the same, but most of them change. So if we gave you the answers for the last year, then we're like, all right, in you go. You wouldn't have the tools for the job now. So instead, what we've done is created a strategy and a process, distilled that down into a process that you can follow and apply to any question that comes up,
Yeah.
whether it's expected, unexpected, or completely out of left field that you don't know what to do. We have a process to help you answer those questions.
So I feel like we might have gone off track and maybe
Yeah.
started talking about interviews, but we got to talk about what's going to happen. So let's talk about
Let's
three
circle
types
back
of.
around. Well, actually, no, we're
Yeah.
talking about the dates, right? So we're talking about the GEMSAS, non-GEMSAS applications. We've covered that. We'll talk about interview offers, then the actual interviews when they're held around September. And then when you're told you get into you've got an offer for a medical school or you don't, is usually in early November, around the same time as when you get the September GAMSAT results.
I love that
And
time
then
of
you,
year. That is my absolute favorite because I
it
just
is.
get like laughing and crying and screaming. I remember actually with Bhakti, um, she emailed and told us what happened, and then I called her, and literally this was the conversation. I went, "Girl," and she went, "Girl," and I went, "Girl," and that went back and forth about 5 million times, and I was like, "Oh my God," and she was like, "Oh my God." It is my absolute favorite because when you've been through this with people, it's a bit of like each of these dates, it's like an emotional roller coaster. As
Yeah.
the dates get closer, it's like as if, and this is like a normal thing, so I hope that people appreciate me sharing it. It's like as if you do the thing, like you do the GAMSAT, and as the date of the GAMSAT results gets closer, your brain does this thing where you start to go, maybe I didn't go as well as I thought. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought. What about the thing that I did? Maybe I'm shit. I bet you I went
Yeah.
shit. And it's like we almost like psych ourselves up that we did worse. Like we forget, no, I did fine, right? That happened to me in the HSC as well. I feel like it's a normal phenomenon, but
Yeah.
every single one of these dates. So when your results are released, when you put in your application, when interviews come out, when offers come out, it's like as the time gets closer. So whatever feelings you're feeling, like let's ride them out. And no, let's normalize the emotional roller coaster of getting into med school because that happens to everyone. I don't
Yeah.
know anyone that goes, I'm fine. I'm set. I'm definitely in. I'm guaranteed. I'm not worried at all. Like
Honestly, we even
everyone else.
feel it for our boot campers. Like I've been talking to some of the team, like Bhakti. You mentioned her; she was a former boot camper. Now she works on the team, and I feel it as well. Waiting for these GEMSAS, sorry, the March GAMSAT offers to come out. I was nervous. I wasn't sleeping well because I'm just like so excited. I want everyone to do so well. Um, but yeah, so those are the dates. And then when you actually start your medical degree is in late January, early February. So that is the cycle there. All right.
It's
So now,
usually after Australia Day. It's like Australia Day, what's that, 25th of January? It's like 27th or 28th. It's something like that. Or is it
yeah,
26th?
it's
26th.
around that time when you
Yeah.
actually get started. So let's now we've had a good chat there about what these scores mean and what to do next. But let's talk about what if you got a great score? and what that great score is and what to do now. And what if you didn't get a great score and what if you're not sure? So if you got a great score, above 70 is a great score, right? You're in a strong position for just about all except probably Flinders. If you're not a Flinders student, you need a much higher score to get in there. But if you got a score in the 70s, you're in a great position for most of the medical schools. And for you, now it's time to start looking at applications and preparing for the interviews. Now, but before we even jump into interviews, you don't want to count your chicken. What is it? Count your chickens before they hatch, right?
Yeah.
You need to make sure that you nail the applications, because the medical schools are very competitive on different factors. So what that means is that some of the medical schools, like UWA, for example, the GPA is the real distinguishing factor. You need a high GPA. We actually did a whole podcast episode on GPAs, which I'll refer you guys to. I don't know the number, but it's called "Is My GPA High Enough?" You can look that up to see what's a high GPA. But you need to look at the actual requirements for each medical school, because you're like this close from getting an interview. You don't want to mess up the application process and miss out, because we have seen this. I remember at a time we were doing an info session at a university. I think it was the University of New South Wales. And afterwards, we presented it, and then there was a Q&A. People came down to have a chat with us, and one guy came up. He's like, "Oh, I got a 75 or a 76, and I didn't get an offer." I'm like, "Dude, you messed up the applications. Like, there's something went wrong in your application process." And it happens more often than we like to think. I'm not here to scare you guys. I just want to make sure you're aware that you don't just kind of tick the boxes and the good things happen. You have to be
Hey,
really
remember
purposeful.
that tutor that worked for us probably 10 years ago now, and he got a decent score. It would have been around 75. And we're like, "Why aren't you in med school?" And he goes, "I just missed the application. I just forgot
Oh,
to put it in." And I was like, "What?" I don't know if it was a tutor, if it was interviewing, but I was like, "You just forgot to put in your application." He's like, "Yeah."
come
I
on.
was like, like the facepalm emoji? I was like literal facepalm emoji.
That's self-sabotage right there. Come on. That is some sort of like
self-sabotage. And I felt for
massive
him.
self-sabotage.
He was a smart boy. Like he would have got in. But
Yeah.
like, you gotta be organized. The dates are the dates, and they do not F around for anyone. Like,
No.
you're 30 seconds late, that's on you.
That's right. Yeah, so for you guys, go through our website there, have a look at the different requirements, and focus on your preferences. I'd recommend submitting some to some of the non-GEMSAS schools as well, so that you can possibly get multiple interviews, and then start like low-key interview prep at that point.
I love how subtle you are. You're like, "I recommend you." No, goddamn, apply for all the medical schools. Like, I have a different approach. I'm a little bit more direct.
Yeah, and we save that for our boot campers, right? We're a bit like hardcore for the boot camp. For you guys, we were just kind of giving you some guidance and information. We haven't really committed to being. But yes, no, totally. If you've got the scores, you should apply everywhere, and then be in the hard position of having to do multiple interviews and reject a couple of offers. Yeah, that'll really suck, Cool. All right, so that's quite straightforward for you guys. It gets more complicated for the next two groups. So what if you got a low score? So a low score would probably be something in the 50s. Even in the low 60s, unless you're a rural or an international student. Or ATSE, yeah. In that case, yeah, there are very different application pathways for you guys. You can have a chat with our team about that. We can kind of guide you through. It's very different depending on which school and whether you are one of those three categories that was rural, international, or ATSE. Yeah, it gets a little complicated. We can't really cover all the different variables on a podcast, so you can chat to our team. Just go to our website or reach out to us. We can guide you through it.
Tom, can I just add in here? If you don't know what ATSE is, you're not ATSE.
Yeah.
For someone listening, that's what I recommend. But remembering it's an art, not a science. So you might be one or multiple. So yeah, reach out and I can help.
Yeah, and so let's say you got you're none of those. You live in the city, whatever. You're a domestic student, and you got a score in the 50s, and again, if you've got a high GPA, like a 7, or if you've got other kind of bonus points. So now we start to get really creative. This is where understanding the process and really working the system can help you. So, for example, the University of Wollongong, if you've got anything above 50, they don't care how much more you've got, as long as it's above 50, because they don't rank you in terms of your GAMSAT score, right? They use GAMSAT as a hurdle. And we recorded a podcast on this last week called The Death of GAMSAT, where we kind of speculated on what this might mean, because it's a big deal. But they have other requirements, different bonuses. So if you're an APRA registered clinician, if you've worked full time, if you've worked in a rural area, all these different things that can actually help you. So you guys have to do some digging. This is what we're really good at in the boot camp, right? For you guys, that could be make or break for you. Because we guide you through step by step what you need to understand. We got worksheets and to identify what are your strong points, where do you stand out, where what's holding you back, and then our interview offer a maximizer, which helps you to rank them and see which one's going to be helpful, which one's not. And then we also have live sessions where we do Q&A sessions where we answer all your questions, make sure you're on the right track and you're applying in the right way. So, not to sell the boot camp, but at the same time, it's probably going to be a big deal for you guys. Understanding
in the gray zone. Yeah. When you say
you're
you
in the
guys,
gray
you
zone.
mean a 65, a 62,
Oh,
a 60.
actually, no, sorry, I've mixed this up. All right. For both of those groups, right? Whether you've got a low score or whether you're in the gray zone, I'm talking to you at this point, I guess. So if you've got a low score, if it's less than 50, let's talk about it that way, right? If it's less than 50, you can't apply to any of the medical schools. They just won't take your application. And in which case, it is a matter of reflecting, understanding what went well, what didn't, in your GAMSAT preparation, and doing things differently next time. Marie, do you want to kind of talk about the mindset component here? If you got a score of less than 50?
If you got it less than 50, it's not the end of the road for you. We just got to make some changes. Like, failure is only failure if you give up. You don't fail getting into med school if you're in the process of getting into med school. So I think what we got to do is start by just some self-forgiveness, maybe looking in the mirror saying I did the best that I could given what I had, and now I need to reassess and make a better plan. Now, if you need help making a plan, we do a free planning strategy session for non-bootcamp members. So if that's something that you want, I'm sure Tom, in the show notes, you and the team can add.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Link if you need to talk. Now, we've been running this for 18 years. We've been doing the bootcamp. So I have spoken and helped students from every starting point. So if you're all 3 sections under 50, if you're just 1 section, I don't really care because I can probably help you there. But what you do need to look at is, how am I going to value myself? You can't say, I'm a failure because I didn't get the result I wanted. You've got to kind of really get yourself up and start to say, I did the best that I could on the day. Something's going to change and let's make a better plan. And success is sticking to that plan. Not looking backwards. There's a reason why the rear view mirror is much smaller than the windscreen. We've got to look at where you're going, and we're going to know it's a process. Not everybody gets in first go. Like, yay, if you get in first go, fan-bloody-tastic. We're all happy for you, great. If that's not your journey, you are becoming the best doctor possible, because guess what? You're learning things that other people who got in straight away are not learning. You're like, think about what a good doctor is. A good doctor is not just a smart person. That's not, like, there's plenty of smart people out there. In fact, there's plenty of smart doctors who are absolute a-holes, okay? Being smart doesn't make you a good doctor. It's the standard. What makes you a good doctor is being compassionate, being resilient, being able to problem solve when no one else can see a solution. It's coming in with a positive attitude, a can-do attitude. And so we got to take these, like what they call soft skills. I don't think they're soft skills at all. I reckon you're hardcore if you've got these skills. But you got to take these soft skills and apply them in other areas of your life. You don't magically become a doctor and then become more resilient. You become more resilient because you overcome adversities in your life. And this may be one of the adversities that you need to overcome. So you got to look at that score and you got to turn the mirror to yourself and say, I am learning skills here that are going to help me be a better doctor, because I want a doctor that's resilient. I want a doctor that's persistent. Like if you get one bad score and you give up, well, what happens if your cancer patient doesn't respond to the first cancer treatment that's given? Do you just give up? No, you find another freaking treatment. If they're not responding to the chemo, you go to radiation therapy. And if it's not radiation therapy, you go to whatever the next thing is, right? The resilience, all of these soft skills is what you've got to say, I'm building these right now in the moment. I am going to be a better freaking doctor because I've had the opportunity and the blessing to be able to build this when it's not a life and death situation. When it's a life and death situation, it's too late to build resilience, okay? You're probably in a hole at that point. So, I don't want people to say, this is the end of the road for me. I'm not smart enough. I can't do it. Incorrect. I have helped hundreds and hundreds of students in your position get in, if not the next time, the time after, but whatever it is, get in. And I can tell you this, when you're a doctor and you are resuscitating someone who's, I don't know, had a heart attack or, whatever, code blue, they're on death's door, okay, and you're pumping their chest. When you bring them back to life, they are never going to ask you, what did you get in the GAMSAT? How many times did you apply to med school? No, they're just going to go, thank bloody God you're around. Thank you for being my doctor. Thank you for not
doing
giving
the
up.
GAMSAT as many times as you had to.
They're never going to, no one cares. So I know it's an emotional time. And, take some time to be angry, take some time to be sad. What I say is the healing's in the feeling. So feel the thing, but don't let that feeling rent your space. Like, don't purchase an apartment in Sadville. Don't purchase an apartment in I hate Aceville, okay? You got to visit for a day, get yourself out of there, pick yourself up, and recreate a plan and get back on the right track.
Amazing. And we'll have a link in the show notes if you want to chat with Maria about how to do that.
Yeah, totally possible. And everyone thinks like, but not for me, I'm different. It's like, you're special, but you're not so special that you can't do this. Okay, you're special in other ways. Don't let whatever's in your head drag you down. Have a little bit of time, grieve it, and then let's just like jump straight back in again.
Amazing. I feel pumped up just listening to that. That was really cool. That's amazing. Thank you for that, Marie. That was awesome. And you guys can listen to actually an interview with one of our students who went through that. Anarchy. She was a single mum, working 2 jobs. I think she got like a score of in the 40s the first time she did the GAMS, turned it around, got into Flinders Medical School the following year. You can go to you can scroll through our podcast. I can't remember which number it is, but it's one of the earlier ones.
I mean, she had every single thing that could have gone wrong, went wrong with her. She was a domestic violence survivor. She was a single mum with a daughter. Just everything that could have been holding her back. Like, she had every excuse in the world, and most people would have gone, oh, it's okay if you don't follow your dreams. And she did it anyway. And I reckon if Anarchy can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, and you should listen
Ashley
to that podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there's other ones in there as well. If you just go back through our feed.
Totally.
Cool. All right, so then we've covered the ones that got a great score, the ones that didn't get the score that they wanted to, and we've kind of talked about the people in between. So you guys
Gray
should
zone?
go. Sorry.
Gray zone. We call
Yeah,
them
the gray zone. In the 60s, or even some people might be the high 50s, depending on your other kind of requirements with schools. But in that gray zone, you should go through the application process really seriously and try to kind of figure that out to see what puts you in a really strong position. And if you want help doing that, obviously you can reach out to us. But that's and then go at the GAMS again, right? For you guys, if you're in that short position, once you've submitted your application, forget all about that and focus on the September GAMSAT. Because time's ticking, and you've got another GAMSAT coming up in September. It's a great opportunity to increase your score, so that next year, if you don't get an interview, you're already ahead because you're using a lot of these lessons from the March exam on the September exam, and you're getting ahead. So for you guys, it's going to be about applying and then forgetting about that application. So you're not there going, oh, maybe I don't have to push myself with GAMSAT because maybe I'll get an interview. We don't want to be in that position, right? We don't want to be thinking that way. We want to forget all about that application and go at September at 110%, because otherwise you're not going to improve.
Well, I think about Will in this situation. He was not in the gray zone. He was a 72. Yeah. Like I was telling him, but that's who you're competing with. You got to think about this again, like you're running the 100-meter race in the Olympics. It's not how fast you go, it's you versus everyone else. And so if your competitors are taking it that seriously, that they're at a 72 and they're willing to go back to get the 78, then if you've got a 62 or a 65 or even a 66 or 67, then you got to be willing to go hard again on the next one to maybe bump it up and get that little bit higher so that you are competitive as well. And so I really want you to think, like, if one person can do it, if Will can do it, you can do it. And if you get an interview, if you're lucky enough to be in the gray zone and you get an interview, then we deal with the GAMSAT when, like, we basically got to prepare in this period, in the kind of May, June, July, August period. We've got to prepare for the worst but hope for the best. It's like the cyclone, or the let's say cyclone that hit us here in Queensland a month or two ago. It's like we thought it was going to be a category 2. We prepared for a category 2. We had literal tape on the windows. I was making ice
food
in
supplies and ice.
We bought cans of tuna in case we filled up the bathtub with water because we thought we'd be with no water. And you know what? Happened to be nothing. But do I regret being prepared? Hell no. Because I rested really feeling like if this hits us, I'm going to be okay. Now, if I didn't prepare, it was almost like guaranteed that it was going to be a cyclone, right? Like, that's what I felt like. And when I was ripping that sticky tape and getting all the bits of sticky bits off the window because the sticky tape left all this residue, when I was busy scrubbing that off, I did not regret my decision at all. We've got to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
All right. So then what if you're resitting GAMSAT? What if you know you're doing the September GAMSAT? Where do you begin? So if you've done March, what's going to be really important is you've probably forgotten a lot of the test by now, but hopefully you remember some of it and you want to note down. Yeah, you're probably getting flashbacks in the middle of the night. But when you sit down and think about it, you can't remember anything. Or maybe you can. But either way, you want to sit down and just kind of brainstorm the things that you struggled with. What were some of the things you did well? Some of the things you need to improve. Write that stuff down. And then we want to do a diagnostic test to get really detailed on what it is that you're missing. And the reason why a diagnostic test is important at this point is because we want to see where you stand. What's changed since March? What hasn't? And get really specific. One of the big problems that a lot of people who get low scores have is that they kind of just made up their prep as they went, or they were too broad and vague with their approach and they weren't specific and strategic and targeted enough. But a diagnostic test, a good one, will really lay out the knowledge and the skills, specifically the skills that you're missing to be able to improve for the next GAMSAT. And if you want a free diagnostic test for sections 1 and 3, we'll put that in the show notes. And that actually, once you do that, it'll actually spit out a list of the skills and the topics that you need to focus on. Not just like physics, because that's what I mean by being broad and vague. We need to get really specific into the topics and the skills.
Totally. And if topics and skills, this isn't making sense, episode 3 of the podcast talks about how to prepare for a skill-based exam differently than a knowledge-based exam, because most people's degrees are knowledge-based degrees. It's like, learn from this textbook and then we're going to give you a test on what's in this textbook. But the GAMSAT is like, learn from this textbook, but we're not actually going to ask you anything about that. We're going to ask you to figure stuff out. And it's like, if you are only learning from like knowledge, so your chemistry, biology, physics as an example, that's where people are going to get under 50 or get a 52 or like something like that, because the knowledge will only get you to maximum the early 50s. It's when you start to get to the high 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even into the hundreds, like when you get the skills, that's what matters. But you can't build a skill if you haven't identified what the skill is first. So the diagnostic test is going to help to identify the skills. Then you can either book a call with me and we can do some sort of planning session for you based on your personal skills that you need to build, or you can do the diagnostic test and listen to episode 3 of this podcast, and I can talk a little bit around skill acquisition and kind of how to make sure you're actually building skills.
Awesome. All right. So that about wraps it up. If you guys have enjoyed this, then hit the subscribe button so that you get notified and when we've got the next podcast coming out. We've got a lot of content coming out for you guys about applications. We'll go specifically into each medical school, and then we'll talk about interviews and then GAMSAT again later on. So if you've enjoyed it, subscribe and share it with your mates. We really appreciate that. That'll go a long way to helping us spread the good word and help other nurses and healthcare professionals become doctors and change the face of healthcare.
I'm so excited for it. I have a podcast recording happening very shortly with a very special guest, which I won't say who she is, but I think a lot of people are going to find it very, very, very useful. So hit that subscribe button so you can get notified, because I'm just so excited to be able to share her with the world. She's my secret little weapon. But thanks, Tom. It's been a great chat. So good to focus on helping people to get interview offers, and I'm just excited for everyone out there.
It's an exciting time. It's a bit stressful and a bit emotional, but at the same time, you're a step closer. Again, that's a big step. You've jumped. That's probably the biggest step. And then we've got the other ones, which are just as important. But
respectfully disagree here. The GAMSAT is not the biggest step. It feels like the biggest step, but every step is just as important.
After I said it, I'm like, hang on, but then the interview's worth. There's more than your GPA and your GAMSAT score, and then the CASPer. If you're doing that, you don't
get an interview though. If you don't get the application right, you don't get an interview. Every step is bloody important.
I know it is, but sometimes it feels like GAMSAT's the big scary one. At least it does for me. But for people are different.
No, I think most people, and this is why a podcast episode like this is so important, because most people think like, oh, I finally learnt the physics and I finally got the score and I'm in. And it's like, no, you can really fluff it up at this point. So please don't. 1, remember to apply, but 2, do it really strategically, because we want to make sure you get in. You are not in medical school yet. Every step is important, and you can do this. Like, I think this is a really big opportunity for people. So you can do this. Other people have been doing this for years and years and years. If they've done it, you can do it too. So I want like our listeners to really feel like this is possible. I can make it happen.
Yeah. And if you need some more inspiration, motivation, go to our podcast feed and go to some of the interviews we've done with different GAMSAT students. You'll see them. They'll be on the cover, and just some amazing stories. And if they can do it, you can too. It's possible. This isn't the end of the road, no matter what your score is. And let's get it done. And reach out to us if you need anything.
Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next week. Hey, I have a cool gift for you, just for listening to the Nurses Doing GAMSAT podcast. We do some of our best work in our Facebook group called, you guessed it, Nurses Doing GAMSAT. It's free to join, and every day we're sharing actionable guides, tips and tricks, and really just how to smash the exam and get into medicine. You can join today by searching Nurses Doing GAMSAT on Facebook. Thanks for listening to another episode, and I'll see you next time.